Tinder of finance. I've been getting a lot of feedback about how I have too many jump cuts in my video. As you can tell by the way that I speak like I'm getting edited with jump cuts to begin with. To be a man that responds well to constructive feedback, I'm going to try my best to not do as many jump cuts as before. But as I've just mentioned, note that 1, I speak like this to begin with, and 2, I don't have a script, so a lot of the videos have long pauses like that where I think about the next spurt of words that I'm about to say, but I'm going to do my best. Today's topic of discussion is exit opportunities in investment banking. I struggled a lot with this topic in the beginning, especially when I was recruiting and looking forward to this job. Because as a person who values loyalty and human bonds, I thought it would be weird to go into something mainly considering what comes after it. And it's kind of like you go into a relationship thinking you'll gain another relationship out of that relationship. Just seemed wrong to me. But after being in a year in my career and talking to others in their respective careers who actually feel like they've hit a wall or they've been too pigeonholed in a very specific field, I think I'm very blessed to say that investment banking, for all it's worth, exit ops is definitely not an issue. You can't suddenly go from being an investment banker to a doctor or be an investment banker to a software engineer. But I would argue most business jobs and a lot of jobs that typically have a higher barrier to entry respect investment banking and the grit and the merit and the prestige and the hours that have been inputted into the job, and it serves as a qualifier of some sorts for the jobs to understand that this is a person that can get through hard times. This is a person that can really go into the weeds and get things done, I hope. The main thesis of this video is to show that when you go into investment banking, you have a lot of options afterwards. That's not to say you should go into investment banking solely as a first step or an entryway to everything else. Investment banking is very demanding, and if the only reason you're going into the profession is to make it to the next step, I think there's easier ways to do that. Maybe this might be the most straightforward way, but if that's the only reason, you should reconsider. The most logical next step that most people in finance and investment banking typically take, at least from my perception, is going to the buy side. The side that I'm part of, the investment banking side, especially within the M&A sphere, is called the sell side because we help firms and institutions sell whatever they're selling. I mentioned in my first video that we're kind of like the Tinder of finance. We're the matchmaker, we're the person in the middle. To elaborate this metaphor, I'm not going to use Tinder anymore. Let's use Yelp. The banks serve as Yelp, connecting consumers and restaurants who equally need each other, one to fund them and one to satisfy their hunger or thirst. The buy side is like going over to the consumer side, whereas you were previously on the Yelp side. You're managing your own money, you're spending your own money, and you're looking for restaurants or businesses to invest in. Obviously, this metaphor falls a little bit apart because the food you consume, you don't necessarily hold it in and have it grow for a couple of years. And then bottom line, buy side is kind of the logical next step. Within this buy side umbrella exists PE, hedge funds, venture capital. In summary, many people exit banking to go into a non-advisory role, but a role where you're managing your own money or your company's money or your partner's money. Feels a bit more tangible. You're not client facing anymore, so the hours might be a bit more manageable. Typically a logical next step because the salary grows almost in line with what you would be making in banking. Although nowadays banking is really competitive in its salary as well, and as you become more partner level, there's much less spots in the buy side, but that's a conversation for another time. Buy side is the logical next step in banking exit opportunities, and typically where I see most of my peers end up. In my terrible metaphor of Yelp, if buy side is the consumer side, there's also the restaurant side, or what I like to call corporate finance. And when I say I like to call, I mean the entire world likes to call. This is going to work for an actual company, a real company. Whenever people ask me, why do you say real company? Sometimes I feel like what we're doing necessarily isn't tangible. We're not selling a product. We're not giving a consumer-facing service. Not that you have to be a real company to do that. Working for a real company like a Microsoft or an Apple or Albertsons, Kroger, companies that you've heard of, companies that people know what they do, companies that don't require a YouTuber to explain their job. And what you would do in these kind of roles would be working in their business department, working in their finance department, and lending your expertise within the overall banking, overall business space, and putting in your hours there. I think people typically looking to stay slightly away from the overall finance Wall Street world and wanting something a bit even more tangible than just investing in something and growing that money pot. Maybe they're passionate about a product, passionate about a company's mission. They tend to go here. It's also, and this is not to demean these roles, these are obviously also challenging, but they tend to be a better work-life balance. And because you are serving yourself in the sense that you're working for your company as opposed to facing clients, the time is much more manageable. I'm continuing on with this corporate finance idea, the restaurant side, but this is a slight step specific, say that 3 times, slight step specific. But I would also argue that tech and startup is a very hot thing that investment bankers have begun to go into. There's definitely a lot of competition in terms of talent between tech and investment banking currently. There's a lot of roles within tech that is not just software engineer or product developer that has to do with finance, numbers, business strategy. Startups also require a lot of bankers to come in and help them out in CFO capabilities, in analyst capabilities. They also know that operating and creating a startup requires a lot of work, and who's better to do a lot of work than investment bankers? Then there is the MBA route. Typically, people would not go to an MBA directly after an analyst phase. They would go to an associate, realize that going up the banking chain is not their calling, and they want a restart. MBA serves as a restarting point. While it's definitely less common now, especially back in the day, an MBA was almost required to even promote within a company. But nowadays, MBA is seen even more as a point where you could do something for a long time, realize that's not for you, and go into an MBA, get your education, but more importantly, grow your network and have it serve as a college 2.0 that almost, I don't want to say wipes out your resume, but creates a base for where you could build up on it again. Ironically, actually it's not ironic, on the other side, there's a lot of people that do other things for a while, get an MBA, and come into banking. So it works as a gateway for both sides. But to reiterate, a lot of bankers, after a while, realizing that banking might not be their way, but they also need a clean start because a lot of these firms are typically only recruiting people right out of analyst years, go back to an MBA and pivot to a hedge fund or private equity or venture capital. This isn't really an exit opportunity, and this is more of me being philosophical, Brian, but I also think it's a great time when you exit banking to take some time off. You've probably grinded your butt off for 2 to 5 years or maybe even 10 years, depending on what rank you're at in banking, and you haven't had time to just sit down and think. Why am I doing the things that I want to do? Am I doing it for the money, which is fine? Am I doing it for a passion? Why do I do the things that I do? What do I do? What do I want to do? Why do I want to do what I want to do? Now you guys know why I need jump cuts. Bottom line, this isn't a typical exit opportunity, nor is it a exit opportunity, but if I had to choose my time right after banking, I would take a slight bit of time off and think and calm down for a bit. You have a skill set. You have the bedrock on your resume. Give yourself some time. What is it that I want to do? And why do I want to do it? And finally, this is me drinking the Kool-Aid and also probably already hearing in the comments, you have to say that because someone might be watching you. But these are my genuine thoughts. You don't have to exit. Maybe you're not ready for an exit, and maybe there's more to gain about being in banking for a couple more years, or maybe a year more. I don't think you should exit solely because everyone else is exiting, or just because the 2 years is over and that's when everyone exits. I've been a man of 22 years that has lived like that a lot, and I think that's probably the biggest portion of my regrets. I've always done something because it seems like the correct thing to do, or the appropriate thing to do, the successful thing to do. But I look at those around me, and those that end up really being, one, happy, but two, also successful, are the people that don't get swayed by those around them or the timing that is typical. They dictate their timing. I think that is crucial, and you should exit when it's time for you to exit, not a time to exit. See y'all next week.